It's very easy to fall for the negativity in the space, the pessimistic trends that we've been dealing with as of late. But frankly, I'm not that pessimistic. I'm very excited about where things are headed for the rest of 2025 and into 2026. In fact, I stumbled across this article talking about 5 macro trends likely to send Bitcoin and XRP on some significant runs. And I do want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about this 2.74 billion number that most people are not aware of. So if you guys are new or haven't already, show your support for the channel down below. Hit that subscribe button, that bell. It's free to do. It'll keep you updated anytime there's new content live here on the channel. So today was really kind of we'll call it a decent day. We did finish on a green note. Actually, we finished up about 2% in terms of XRP. We just flipped over. It's about 7:07 p.m. Central Standard Time. And now we're seeing a little bit of red, a little bit of green throughout the market. And hopefully we can get another Sunday boost. I would love for XRP to actually try to target this 100-day moving average. That'd be a great spot to see if we can make a break into the early part of the week. But I'd love to start off on a green note once again. In fact, this week for XRP, guys, has in fact been green. And that is a positive sign. We're fighting that bull market support band. And once we start closing candles above there, which it's currently about a half a cent away. Yeah, about a half a cent away. That will be a very positive sign for XRP. But at the same time, we're probably going to see a lot of alts doing a very similar thing at that point in time. But, what people are mostly falling for as of late is kind of this negative, loud noise in the space that has been very deafening. And unfortunately, it's caused retail sentiment to just kind of be garbage. And it hasn't given us that boost that normally we would see in this early part of 2025. And so now we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. But we have some pretty big things that are taking place that can, in fact, carry XRP to some higher highs. And these are these 5 macro trends that we need to be watching here. First of all, liquidity is rising again. So this pool of spendable cash in the global economy, we obviously know it's been on the rise. We've talked about global M2 liquidity that has been rising for quite some time. And obviously BTC is very much following this M2 trend. It historically has followed this. And right now we're kind of in this phase of waiting for that next kick in the rear for BTC to try to target up, 130K according to this chart. And frankly, if we do start, actually, it might be that high. Might not be that. It's kind of around that range. Anyways, if we do get a kick in the rear for BTC that sends us on those types of runs, that is typically when XRP has done incredibly well. And again, this money on the rise being injected into markets and into the economy is a big thing that does help the stock market, the crypto market, and so on and so forth. Second, the Fed is lining up to cut rates. Now, I don't know if anybody else has paid attention, but there is a very high likelihood that we are getting an interest rate decrease in one of the next 2 FOMC meetings, whether that be July or September. Right now, betting odds are, in fact, on September, but there is the possibility that with good macro news, good macro data, we could, in fact, see an interest rate decrease in July. I think July would be the right thing to do. They should do a quarter basis point, see how it sticks. They get about a month and a half until the following meeting, and that would be the way they should progress. But I'm not in the Fed. I don't make those calls. 3, weakening US dollar opens the door for foreign buyers. So this has actually been very good for the crypto market. Historically speaking, there tends to be an inverse correlation with the DXY. And we have seen the DXY just absolutely been cratering, actually since the start of January. Now, unfortunately, we've had so much negative news in the market that's pushed everything down along with it, but this tends to send the crypto market the opposite direction. It's not always perfect, but it is a good sign, and it is usually a good indication of what comes next for crypto. At the same time, what this also talks about is bond yields drifting lower, another thing that tends to have an inverse correlation with the crypto market. What we've seen and been watching specifically is 10-year bond yields. Now, we did get a couple spikes on some of these, tariff news and back and forth with China and all these different things. But right now you guys can see that, since May 22nd, there's kind of a distinct trend here. And obviously we're getting a little bit of push in the market over the past few days, which is moving inverse the bond market. That's a great sign. That's exactly what we want to see here. 5, real incomes are climbing. That is great. Incomes need to go up. But what we also need to see is inflation flatlining, which we were kind of seeing. Not necessarily flatlining per se, like 0% inflation, but they've been flatter. We have not been in this era where things have been just running rampant for so long that it's outpacing income. That's the point that we got to. That's why things were so bad. That's why people were so pressed for money when they go to the grocery store. Those times are slightly improving, which is great, because that opens up the door for, again, capital to enter the markets. But I think one of the biggest things that can really get the market moving here is not even these 5 macro factors. It is actually the money in the market just having very limited supply to actually buy into. And this is something that I don't think enough people talk about. But what we've witnessed during this time is, yes, some consolidation phases, some chop, but I don't think people have paid attention to the big trends taking place behind the scenes. We have seen whale accumulation high across the crypto space. We have seen institutional accumulation high across the crypto space. And one thing I like to look at a lot is this exchange supply removal. And this has been a very consistent theme. And you guys can see that, basically since, December 1st, this has been a much higher trend than we've dealt with historically in terms of XRP. In fact, even this week, which is kind of a more quiet week during this time, it's on par with some of the biggest weeks we were actually dealing with in 2024. So things have radically changed, and I will actually let people know that over the last 6 months, we have seen $2.74 billion worth of XRP removed from exchanges. That is not a small amount. That is a very distinct trend. We have had very few weeks where it's actually been an inflow to exchanges. Even in some of the weeks where we've had some of the biggest shakeouts and some of the worst news, exchange hacks and liquidation events and war and all these different things, it hasn't mattered. The trends have stayed very distinct. And guys, there are finite supplies around the crypto space. You really have to think about that. What happens when there is so much accumulated that there is very little to go around, even for the current demand that we have? That makes price go up. What happens then when even more demand comes? Price goes up faster. That's where things can get really exciting and kind of take off in a hurry in the crypto market. I'm not saying that's happening today, but we are building to this moment where the market can go on an insane run, and even some of these macro factors can be kind of a little bit of fuel for the fire. That's where I'm very excited about what the last half of 2025 is going to look like, and that's why I'm even more excited for 2026 and the cycle following this. Again, we might be entering a super cycle. We'll talk about that more later on, but I just wanted to share that with you guys. I appreciate you as always. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts below, but have a great day. Catch you guys in the next one. Take care.